It's a strange feeling when a game you've invested dozens of hours into reaches its final chapter, only to leave you unsatisfied. Endings are supposed to tie everything together: the battles fought, the choices made, the journeys shared. Yet in many RPGs, the conclusion feels rushed, disconnected, or hollow, leaving players with more frustration than fulfillment. That moment of closure, the payoff for all the time and emotion poured in, is where trust between player and story either holds strong or breaks apart. And when it breaks, the entire experience can feel diminished. So let's take a closer look at why RPG endings often collapse and what that means for the stories we rely on to carry us through. When we talk about poor endings in RPGs, we're not just pointing to a single bad cutscene or a disappointing final boss. It's about the broader idea of closure, how the story resolves, how the player's choices are honored, and whether the journey feels complete. To understand why these endings break trust, we first need to define what makes an ending poor in the context of role-playing games. A poor ending in an RPG isn't just a single disappointing scene, it's a collapse of closure. Sometimes the resolution feels rushed, cutting off arcs before they've even had a chance to breathe. Other times the tone shifts so sharply that it clashes with the journey that players have taken. Choices that once felt meaningful may be brushed aside, leaving players wondering if their decisions mattered at all. The payoff can feel hollow, with climaxes that fail to deliver the weight the story promised. Epilogues may drift into disconnected territory, offering little sense of consequence or continuity. And even when some threads are tied neatly, others vanish without explanation, creating an imbalance that leaves satisfaction uneven. Together, these 6 aspects define what makes an ending poor in the context of RPGs, and they form the lens through which we'll explore how finales collapse and why they break the trust players place in the story. Rushed resolutions. Rushed resolutions often cut stories short before they've had time to breathe, which usually comes at the cost of the narrative feeling choppy or poorly done. For players, this translates into a finale that feels more like a sudden stop than a natural conclusion. The investment of hours spent exploring, battling, and role-playing is undercut when arcs are closed in a hurry, leaving characters underdeveloped and plotlines unresolved. The impact of this flaw is clear. Trust in the story breaks down. Players expect the ending to reward their patience, but instead they are left with the sense that the developers ran out of time or resources. This shows itself in several ways: cut content that leaves gaps in the narrative, abrupt tonal shifts that don't match the journey, or final bosses that appear without proper build-up. Each of these signals show that the resolution was rushed, and each chips away at the player's sense of closure. A case study can be found in Dragon Age 2. The game built a compelling narrative around Hawke's rising Kirkwall, weaving political turmoil and personal struggles into a rich tapestry. Yet the ending feels rushed and narrow, boiling down to a single conflict between mages and Templars regardless of the choices made. The resolution offers little variation, leaving players with the sense that their decisions and relationships had minimal impact. After hours of shaping Hawke's legacy, the abrupt finale felt like a missed opportunity, undermining the depth of the journey. This example highlights how rushed resolutions don't just weaken a single moment, they can undermine the legacy of an entire game. And it's why players often remember the disappointment of a poor ending more vividly than the satisfaction of the journey itself. Tonal mismatch. Tonal mismatch happens when the ending shifts mood or style in ways that clash with the journey players have taken. Imagine spending hours in a grounded, character-driven RPG, only for the finale to suddenly lean into spectacle or comedy that feels out of place. For players, this disconnect makes the conclusion feel less like a natural extension of the story and more like a jarring detour. The impact is subtle but powerful. Immersion breaks. Players who are invested in the emotional weight of the narrative find themselves pulled out of the experience, questioning whether developers truly understood the tone that they had built. This mismatch often shows itself through endings that swing too far into melodrama, introduce hidden sci-fi or fantasy twists, or resolve conflict with humor that undermines the seriousness of prior events. The case study can be seen in Final Fantasy XV. Much of the game built on a road trip camaraderie between Noctis and his friends, balancing light-hearted banter with personal growth. Yet, the ending pivots sharply into heavy tragedy, with little transition to prepare players for the tonal shift. While some appreciated the emotional weight, many felt blindsided. The warmth and humor that defined the journey seemed abandoned in favor of a darker finale. The result was a tonal mismatch that left players divided, some praising the boldness but others feeling disconnected from the story they had grown attached to. This example shows how tonal mismatch doesn't just change the mood, it can fracture the bond between player and narrative. And when that bond breaks, even a well-crafted ending risks feeling hollow. Ignored choices. Ignored choices happen when the decisions made throughout the game are brushed aside or barely acknowledged in the finale. For players, this feels like a betrayal. The promise of agency is broken, and the story no longer reflects the journey they shaped. The impact is immediate. Trust collapses. RPGs thrive on the idea that choices matter, but when the ending reduces these choices to a single outcome, players are left wondering why they bothered making them at all. This flaw often shows itself in finales that funnel every path into the same conclusion, or in endings that disregard companions, factions, or moral decisions that define the playthrough. A case study can be found in Fallout 3. Across the wasteland, players would make countless decisions about survival, morality, and alliances. Yet the original ending forced a single sacrifice scenario, ignoring companions who could logically step in. No matter how players had shaped their journey, the finale offered little variation, reducing agency to a scripted moment. The backlash was so strong that Bethesda later released the Broken Steel expansion to extend and rework the ending, acknowledging how deeply players felt their choices had been dismissed. This example shows how ignored choices don't just weaken the finale, they undermine the very foundation of role-playing. And when agency is stripped away, the ending feels less like the player's story and more like someone else's script. Hollow payoff. Hollow payoff happens when the climax fails to deliver the emotional or narrative weight the story has promised. For players, this is the moment where all the battles, decisions, and relationships should come together. Yet instead, the finale lands with a thud. It's not that the ending is rushed or mismatched in tone, it's that the resolution simply doesn't feel earned. The impact is deflating. Players expect the climax to validate their journey, but when it lacks intensity or meaning, the entire experience risks feeling pointless. Hollow payoff often shows itself in final bosses that are underwhelming, plot twists that resolve too easily, or emotional beats that fail to resonate. It's the difference between a finale that lingers in the memory and one that fades the moment the credits roll. A case study can be found in Borderlands 3. The game built a chaotic, humor-driven adventure with high stakes, but its ending was widely criticized for lacking emotional weight. The final confrontation with the Calypso twins felt anticlimactic, with little sense of payoff for the hours of build-up. The humor that carried the series clashed with the need for a meaningful resolution, leaving players with a finale that felt flat rather than triumphant. For many, the journey was fun, but the ending failed to deliver the sense of closure or reward that should have capped it. This example shows how hollow payoff doesn't just weaken the finale, it robs the journey of its lasting impact. Without a strong climax, even the most entertaining RPG can end on a forgettable note. Disconnected epilogue. A disconnected epilogue happens when the post-ending scenes fail to carry the weight of the journey, offering little sense of continuity or consequence. For players, this moment should provide closure, a glimpse of how their actions shape the world. But when the epilogue feels detached, it reduces the finale to a series of notes rather than a living conclusion. The impact is subtle but lasting. Instead of feeling rewarded, players are left with a sense of distance, as if the story they shaped no longer belongs to them. This flaw often shows itself in epilogues that summarize events too briefly, rely on static narration instead of dynamic storytelling, or fail to reflect the complexity of the player's journey. A case study can be found in Fallout New Vegas. While the game is praised for its branching choices and faction dynamics, its ending often funnels into slideshow epilogues that feel detached from the immersive world players had just experienced. The narrated slides summarize outcomes but lack the emotional depth of continuity of gameplay, leaving many feeling that their hard-won decisions were reduced to bullet points. For some, the epilogue provided clarity. For others, it felt like a disconnected afterthought that didn't match the richness of the journey. This example shows how disconnected epilogues don't just weaken closure, they risk turning a player's legacy into a list, stripping away the emotional resonance that should carry beyond the credits. Unbalanced closure. Unbalanced closure happens when certain threads are tied neatly while others vanish without explanation. For players, this creates a finale that feels lopsided. Satisfaction in one area is undercut by neglect in another. It's like finishing a puzzle with missing pieces. The picture's there, but it doesn't feel complete. The impact is frustrating because it highlights inconsistency. Players may see one character's journey honored while another's is ignored, or one faction's outcome detailed while others fade into silence. This flaw often shows itself in endings that prioritize main plot lines while sidelining companions, or in epilogues that give disproportionate weight to certain arcs. A case study can be found in Chrono Cross. The game builds a sprawling narrative with dozens of recruitable characters, each with their own potential arcs. Yet, the ending focuses heavily on the central plot, leaving many companions with little to no resolution. For players who invested in those side stories, the finale felt uneven. Closure for some, silence for others. The balance didn't erase the game's strengths, but it left the conclusion feeling incomplete, as if parts of the journey had been forgotten. This example shows how unbalanced closure doesn't just weaken satisfaction, it creates uneven trust. Players will walk away with mixed feelings, fulfilled in some areas, disappointed in others, and the ending lingers as a reminder of what was left unresolved. Taken together, these flaws show how fragile RPG endings can be. But endings don't have to collapse this way. By rethinking how stories conclude, developers can preserve immersion, honor player agency, and deliver finales that feel earned. So, let's shift from the problems to the possibilities, and explore solutions that can help RPGs close their stories with strength instead of disappointment. Thoughtful resolution. Where rushed resolutions cut stories short, thoughtful resolution gives arcs the room they need to breathe. This means endings unfold at a pace that feels natural, allowing characters and plotlines to reach their full conclusion. For players, it's the difference between a finale that feels chopped off and one that feels earned, a closing act that respects the time and investment they've given. The impact of thoughtful resolution is powerful. Trust is preserved. Players walk away with the sense that the developers cared enough to finish the story properly, rewarding patience with closure. This strength often shows itself in finales that take time to acknowledge key relationships, resolve lingering conflicts, and provide a rhythm that matches the journey rather than rushing past it. A case study can be found in Persona 5 Royal. The game's expanded ending adds significant narrative content, giving players more time with the Phantom Thieves and tying up arcs that felt incomplete in the original release. Instead of cutting off abruptly, the resolution unfolds with care, offering emotional depth and a sense of continuity. For many, this thoughtful pacing transformed the finale into one of the most satisfying in modern RPGs. The sample shows how thoughtful resolution doesn't just fix pacing, it elevates the entire journey. By giving endings the space they deserve, developers can ensure that the final act feels like a true reward rather than a rushed afterthought. Consistent and evolving tone. Where tonal mismatches break immersion, consistent or deliberately evolving tone strengthens the journey. This means the ending feels like a natural extension of the story's mood, whether it stays steady or shifts in a way that's earned. For players, it's the difference between being blindsided by a sudden tonal change and being guided into a finale that feels aligned with everything that came before. The impact is immersion that lasts until the credits. Players remain emotionally anchored because the tone respects the journey they've taken. This strength often shows itself in endings that balance humor and gravity without contradiction, or in finales that gradually evolve the mood so the shift feels intentional rather than abrupt. A case study can be found in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Throughout the game, the tone blends gritty realism with moments of levity, and the endings reflect that balance. Whether Geralt's journey concludes in bittersweet solitude or with warmth among friends, the tone feels consistent with the narrative threads players have followed. The shift towards closure is gradual, preparing players for the emotional weight without breaking immersion. This example shows how consistent or evolving tone doesn't just avoid mismatch, it deepens connection. By respecting the mood of the journey, developers can craft finales that feel authentic, leaving players satisfied rather than jarred. Honored choices. Where ignored choices stripped away agency, honored choices elevate it. This means the ending reflects the decisions players made throughout the journey, weaving their actions into the finale in ways that feel meaningful. For players, it's the difference between watching a scripted conclusion and experiencing a resolution that feels like their own story. The impact is empowerment. When choices are honored, players feel ownership of the ending, knowing their decisions shape the outcome. This strength often shows itself in finales that branch into multiple paths, acknowledge companion arcs, or adapt faction outcomes based on the player's alliances. A case study can be found in Undertale. The game's ending varies dramatically depending on whether players pursue a pacifist, neutral, or genocide route. Each choice is honored with unique narrative consequences, reflecting not just the player's decisions, but their moral stance throughout the journey. The result is an ending that feels deeply personal, rewarding players for the path they chose rather than funneling them into a single outcome. This example shows how honored choices don't just fix agency, they transform it into the heart of the finale. By respecting the player's role, developers can craft endings that feel authentic, memorable, and truly earned. Meaningful payoff. Where hollow payoffs deflate the climax, meaningful payoff ensures the finale resonates with weight and purpose. This means the ending delivers on the promise built throughout the journey, tying together battles, relationships, and themes in a way that feels earned. For players, it's the difference between a finale that fades instantly and one that lingers long after the credits roll. The impact is lasting satisfaction. When the payoff is meaningful, players feel that their time and investment were rewarded with a climax that validates the journey. This strength often shows itself in finales that balance challenge with narrative depth, resolve emotional arcs alongside gameplay, and provide a sense of triumph or bittersweet closure that matches the tone of the adventure. A case study can be found in Red Dead Redemption 2. The game builds an epic tale of loyalty, betrayal, and survival, and its ending delivers a powerful emotional payoff. Arthur Morgan's fate reflects the choices players made, and the resolution ties directly into the larger saga of the series. The climax is both tragic and meaningful, leaving players with a sense of closure that honors the journey while deepening the legacy of the world. This example shows how meaningful payoff doesn't just fix the climax, it transforms it into the heart of the experience. By delivering finales that resonate, developers can ensure the ending becomes a defining memory rather than a forgettable moment. Dynamic Aftermath. Where disconnected epilogues reduce legacies to static notes, Dynamic Aftermath brings the world to life beyond the credits. This means that the post-ending scene feels continuous with the journey, showing how the player's actions ripple outward in ways that matter. For players, it's the difference between reading a detached summary and witnessing a living world that reflects the story. The impact is continuity. When Aftermath is dynamic, players feel their influence persists, and the world they shaped continues to evolve. This strength often shows itself in epilogues that use gameplay or cinematic sequences to show consequences, companions whose futures are fleshed out, or worlds that visibly change based on the player's path. A case study can be found in Dragon Age Inquisition Trespasser DLC. Instead of a static summary, the expansion provides a playable epilogue where players actively experience the fallout of their choices. Relationships, political alliances, and unresolved conflicts are addressed in real time, making the aftermath feel alive rather than detached. The result is a finale that extends immersion, giving players closure while reinforcing the sense that their story truly mattered. This example shows how Dynamic Aftermath doesn't just fix epilogues, it transforms them into living extensions of the journey. By making the post-ending world responsive, developers can ensure the story feels complete, continuous, and deeply personal. Balanced Closure. Where unbalanced closure leaves arcs uneven, balanced closure ensures every thread receives its due. This means the finale distributes attention across main plots, companion stories, and side arcs in a way that feels fair and complete. For players, it's the difference between walking away with mixed feelings and leaving with the sense that the entire journey was respected. The impact is harmony. When closure is balanced, players feel that no part of their investment was forgotten, and every character or storyline finds its place in the ending. This strength often shows itself in finales that weave together multiple resolutions, give companions meaningful send-offs, and acknowledge both large and small choices without disproportionate focus. A case study can be found in Divinity Original Sin 2. The game's ending reflects the diverse paths players can take, offering closure not only for the central plot, but also for companions and factions. Each thread is given space, ensuring the finale feels comprehensive rather than lopsided. The balance between the personal arcs and the overarching narrative creates a sense of completeness, rewarding players for the breadth of their engagement. This example shows how balanced closure doesn't just fix uneven endings, it elevates them into holistic experiences. By honoring every thread, developers can craft finales that feel fair, fulfilling, and truly complete. Together, these solutions show that RPG endings don't have to collapse under the weight of their flaws. More than fixes, they are reinventions, proving that endings can be as memorable as the journeys that led to them. And with these possibilities in mind, we can now step back and reflect on what stronger endings mean, not just for games, but for the players who carry those stories with them long after the credits fade. And so, RPG endings remind us that closure is more than credits. It is the echo of the journey. The question that lingers is simple. If the ending is what players carry with them, shouldn't it be crafted as carefully as the beginning? Thanks guys for watching, and as always, stay safe everyone. Bye for now.